Hello and welcome back to Hexgrid Hangouts. This week I am joined by freelance Paizo publisher. No. I'm joined by Paizo freelancer Alex Augunas. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. We recorded this really on last minute notice, didn't we?
Yeah. I was like, I'll give him a couple days, if he wants to, from the start, I'm familiar with your work. I'm a fan of your work, but rarely, I see. So let's get some bare essentials. So you're a freelancer for Paizo.
Right.
Today
Yes, I am.
you're here to talk a good deal about your latest Kickstarter for Starfarer Species Reforged, a Starfinder compatible project.
Yep, that's right. I do a lot of stuff
Mhm.
for Starfinder and sometimes Pathfinder Second Edition, but mostly Starfinder nowadays. I am part of the No Direction Network.
Ah,
I'm the I'm one of the co-hosts for No Direction Beyond, which is No Direction Starfinder news, reviews, and interviews
mm-hmm.
podcast. I am an occasional actual play personality on No Direction shows. I played Shivi in Stellar, which was our actual play of the first book of Against the Aeon Throne. And I'm in a couple other upcoming projects. And I also own Everybody Games, which is a third-party publishing company that specializes in third-party products for Starfinder, Pathfinder. I dabble a little bit in 5th edition D&D too, but mostly it's Starfinder that I'm working on these days.
Nice. As one of the homebrew Starfinder adventure play or actual play podcasts, I eat up any homebrew content I can, and today the Species Reforged launched. You're already 60% of the way there, and I saw the tweets. I'm like, you know what? I don't do this. I'm gonna shoot my shot. I'm gonna ask if anyone from your group wants to meet up and chat. So I'd love to chat more about that, but a little more about you. So because this is ostensibly a Starfinder podcast, we do dabble with other things rarely. Tell me a little bit about your involvement playing, getting into, and then content creating for this system.
Oh my, I've done a lot for
Yeah.
Starfinder. So I am one of the three freelancers who are credited in the Starfinder core rulebook.
Mm.
Um, Not many people know this, but the Starfinder core rulebook needed a lot of help because while the Starfinder core rulebook was being in development, Paizo was working on something else that was really big. We didn't know this at the time, but it was second edition Pathfinder. So those two projects were happening at the same time, which meant you didn't have all of the designers who normally do all of the design projects available to do Starfinder. So they needed to pull in some freelancers to help myself, Amber Stewart, and Thurston Hillman. Thurston, who
Oh wow.
became an employee of Paizo, were the three who were picked. And all three of us are rather prolific in our own ways. Thurston obviously is Thurston. He was a organized play juggernaut. Everybody knew who he was even before he took the Paizo job
Mm.
as the Starfinder organized play developer, which was a role that he got partially because of his work on the core rule book. And then Amber is just incredibly talented. She does so many of the different adventure path volumes for Pathfinder that it makes my head spin. And then there's
Yeah.
me. And I was at that point in time in my career, I was the crunch guy.
Ah.
I literally was in an entire year of Pathfinder player companions. If you've ever heard of that line, it was like the line that added all the crunchy extra goodness to the different
Yeah.
classes. Some of the ones I was really well known for was I'm the crazy person who wrote the advanced weapon trainings in Weapon Master's Handbook. I did advanced armor trainings in Armor Master's Handbook. Um, I outlined the majority of Blood of the Beast. That player companion is my
Mm-hmm.
baby. That because that book got assigned to Owen, and then they were like, "Oh, actually, we want you to be the development lead on Starfinder." So he's like, well, I can't tell anybody about this, but I need someone I can trust to like take over heavy sections of this book and psychic anthology. Alex, do
Oh
this. You
wow.
you, you like Kitsune? Go ahead. Yeah, you like Kitsune. Here, just do this. Write whatever you want. We'll make it work. I'm like, all right, whatever I want. That'll be good. And so like, there's a lot of things in that book that I'm like, yes, that I hear people talk about all the time.
I'm
I don't know how.
no, you're good. Keep going.
Good. Sorry.
No. I was gonna say
I was gonna,
in Pathfinder 1E homebrew podcast I play, it's still releasing episodes, but we're no longer recording because the show has ended. The story has ended.
uh-huh.
We've got that one of my players, Akim, in this pod is the GM and edits that one, and I play a side character who is a Kitsune paladin of Abadar, and I'm like, I'm familiar with Kitsune. I played one in a little bit of Society, and I
Uh-huh.
was like, okay, cool. I want to play a fox man. I want to be this guy, and just the sheer dearth of options. I'm like, oh my god, I can't bring all of this, to bear, but I will like pick and choose, like, and make something real fun. So yeah, I'm unknowingly quite familiar with your work there.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that I'm most proud of from Blood of the Beast is Pathfinder First Edition has this rule system that I'm sure you're familiar with called the alternate gosh, what is it? The alternate favorite class
Yes.
bonuses. And my favorite thing for that is like it drives me crazy how hard it is to just get 9 tails in
Yeah.
that game. I just want
Yep.
my tails, and I don't even want them on every
Mhm.
character, just like some of
Yeah.
them. And so one of my solutions to try to help as many characters as I could, because when they assign you these player companions, they give you like kind of a rough outline of what they
Mhm.
wanted. And one of the things they told me is they were like, you can do pretty much whatever you want, but we don't want you to have more than this many words of favored class bonuses. And
Oh.
I respect
Mhm.
that because like that's not an exciting
Yeah.
thing. Like nobody goes, oh, favorite class bonuses, this is great. And so I was like, wait a minute, I wonder if they'll let me cheat. And so like that's why Kitsune are the only race in Pathfinder First Edition that have a favored class bonus that every class can take, and that's the ability to put 6 points into it to get a free magical tail feat. Uh, because I did that a lot when I was working with Owen on the player companion. I was like, here's a crazy idea that would never make it into a core rulebook. Let's see if someone will let me publish this. And then like with Owen, the answer was often
Yeah.
yes. Yes, you can do
Yep.
that. So some of my wackier work comes from the player companion line. And then so because I had all that work and Owen was the lead designer, he was like, I need somebody who knows mechanics and can do interesting mechanics to help us on
Yeah.
Starfinder. And so they brought me onto the core rulebook, where I was assigned equipment. Now,
Oh
that doesn't
man.
mean like technical. Yeah, that doesn't mean technological items. I wrote every piece of equipment in the core rulebook except for weapons,
Mhm.
armor, uh, upgrades and fusions to both of those things. So I didn't do any armor upgrades or armor fusions. I didn't do computers or vehicles. And I feel like there's something else I didn't do, and I'm sure I'll remember it later. But like any technological items, magic items, hybrid items, personal
Yep.
items, all of that was all like what I wrote. And there were some things that they were like, we know that we want X to work like Y. Like a good example is they already had their math for the healing serums and the mnemonic editors done. So they were just like, for those, they were like, here, just put these. This doesn't count towards your word count. Enjoy. And for everything else, it was me going, what type of personal items do people want in a space
Yep.
game? That was a very interesting conversation, because the thing that became very apparent to me is that my background on what science fantasy is very different from the architects of the Starfinder core
Okay.
rulebook. Like when I sat down, Owen was like, you need to watch Star Trek. I'd never seen anything but like the
Hmm.
movies. They're like, you need to watch Firefly, you need to watch Serenity. And like these are a lot of things that people are like, oh yeah, you totally got to watch
Yep.
them. I'm like, I like Mobile Suit Gundam, Iron Blooded Orphans also.
Yep.
so so like a lot of my influences for Starfinder is like a lot of like the high octane
Hmm.
anime. And I like that I'm not the only person who clearly feels that way, because the adventure paths and the Starfinder scenarios in
Yeah,
Starfinder are just so out there, and it's so
they
good.
are. I was just about to ask. So, you come into this with your not preconceptions, but your uh, preferences, and they say, hey, you need
Mhm.
to watch XYZ, these big tentpole things that are massive in science fantasy. Was there any sort of and I'm not here looking for dirt, but was there any like butting of heads where you would like try to sneak in your Gundam when they were like, no, 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 we want Malcolm Reynolds? Was there anything of
Uh,
that?
no, because I wanted to get more work back.
Fair, you
I
know what?
wanted to
Fair.
work, so I was like,
Yep.
so so my thing was like, I actually did not watch most of that stuff. I would do like Wikipedia
Yeah.
articles, because the other thing is like that book was on such a tight a
Oh.
deadline, just because of what it needed. Oh yeah, that book was on a very tight deadline. When they brought us, I mean, like, so Paizo, when they're making a core rule book, and this actually isn't really just Paizo, this is kind of just industry best
Hmm.
practices. If you're going to make your core rule book, you want to make it to your internal handbook. Like, you typically will sit down, come up with a style guide, figure out how you want everything to go, and you use that to develop the core rule book, so you have like this baseline of what your style should look like, and then you take that and you send it out to all your other freelancers. It's why it's so rare for freelancers to be in core rulebook products. Pathfinder Second Edition does not have any freelancers in the core rulebook. Neither does the first edition. Starfinder needed it just because of the timetable that it was put on, and honestly, they waited until they knew that they absolutely could not get the book done without help to ask the three of us
Oh
for help.
wow.
And I think that, I mean, like, that I hope that doesn't sound bad, because I'm not trying to make it sound bad. It's just like the realities of what it's like in the
Sure.
industry trying to get a project like that
Yeah.
done. And I don't blame them for that. I'm not saying like, oh, you should bring me on all your core rule books. Like, like, no, just like they needed help. They trusted me enough to ask me for help, and I was like,
Yeah.
absolutely, I want to be in a core rule book. It has the side effect that even if I don't, like, if I'm not involved in writing a book, like if it's Starfinder compatible, my name is in it, which is kind of wild.
Oh, nice. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
because like,
the curious happenstance of, hey, we need this. You took the leap, and it worked. It's worked out for everyone. Starfinder is uh, a massive. I mean, I'm not really big into the industry itself, so like it's
mhm,
it's my bread and butter. Like it is. I'm not a crunchy guy personally. I'm more the setting and I mean the equipment. I mean, you flip through the equipment, like this is everything I would need. Like that stuff is 100% in my wheelhouse. Why it's my favorite game to play. I mean, I can't really speak to mechanics. Like I swallow the mechanics so I can savor the setting that I get to play in, and like it's like I've heard a couple other stories about how you know Pathfinder 2e was like, okay, we need like all hands on deck kind of thing, and I kind of heard some things about like Starfinder's like, we brought in people, we got it done down to the wire to get it out by Gen Con. I think it was. Yeah,
mhm.
and it's just so cool how like how scrappy even the creation of the game is. Because when I play, I'm very much a Firefly person. I one of my players is gonna hate me for saying this. I'm still working my way through like Cowboy Bebop for the first time. Like I have like all this lore and stuff in my head, and to play like when I hear of just how uh, unique the creation of the system was. I'm like, yeah, this is science
Mhm.
fantasy. This is sci-fi as hell. Just you know, emergency power to the equipment apparently, and they got you, and you've clearly been with them ever since, still churning out content.
Yeah, I since the core rulebook, I was involved in Pact Worlds. I
Mm-hmm.
did all of the spells in Pact Worlds. I was in Alien Archive 2. I am the person who wrote Squawxes. So if you ever want,
Oh,
if you like
okay, yeah,
Squawxes and the companion feat, that is me. I also did the Gorians, the plant people
Yeah.
that are from Pathfinder First
Mhm.
Edition, and this one is less impressive. I did herd animals, so like the
Look,
rules for all of the herd animals, I wrote the rules for
I
those.
use herd animals way more than I probably should, because like I'm from the like thinking like, there's got to be wildlife, there's got like any setting, like I don't use them too much, but in planning I'm like, okay, here's this civilization, here's this settlement, what's their food source? And 8 times out of 10 I go herd animals, of course, some sort of herd animal, of course, right? I mean, that's what you do when you go to an alien world, is
Yeah.
you cultivate a renewable food resource. And no, herd animals and predators are amazing tools at my side. So you did the squawks, which I'm a fan of. So does that mean you had stuff to do with the squawks kind of zombie we see in Alien Archive 4, I believe?
No, I don't think they wanted to ask me to kill my baby.
Oh, you know what? That's fair. That would have been quite evil of who's because I've had we've had Jason Tondro on the pod, and he affectionately calls the
Mhm.
Starfinder team the Star Chamber, which
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
just fucking love. Um,
Yeah, it's great. It's a great
and
name.
so I
And Jake is a treasure. I'm glad you've gotten to have him on.
oh
He's
he's
great.
yeah he was you know putting himself out there like, oh, Fly for Your Die's coming out, it's Firefly, it's this and that. And I'm like, I shot my shot, and he made a joke about like, I can be pretty on a podcast. I'm like, I have a podcast. And he played just some wandering mystic, and then we had a good chat about what he does, and I became an instant fan of just his energy is infectious. I started listening to his Star Trek podcasts, like I became a little bit of a reply guy to him on social media, which I finally calmed down on. But no, he is just that energy, that, and I mean this nicely, Jason, if you're listening, that cantankerous older guy that's like, when I hear him like going on a tear, like, and when he says "for Christ's sake," I'm like, oh man, he is in it now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's great. I've interviewed him on No Direction Beyond,
Oh, okay.
and we've had a similar experience. He's really
Yeah.
good. I very much enjoy him. Honestly, the Star Chamber are some of my favorite people at Paizo.
Hmm.
I hope you get the chance to have like Jason Keeley and Joe
Yep.
Piscini, Lou. I'm going to say his name wrong. Palazar. I always say his name wrong.
Okay.
They
Yeah.
are all awesome.
Hmm.
They are
Yep.
great, and I recommend if you ever get the chance to sit down with any of them. Oh, John Compton too.
Oh yeah.
They're all
Yeah,
wonderful.
I'm John Compton is a staple of the Starfinder. It's not the quote unquote official Starfinder Discord, but goddamn, all the devs that are in there, and John Compton's constantly providing guidance and a steady hand sometimes to some frenetic situations. But yeah, you're all great people to have on. I just like, as my imposter syndrome ebbs and flows, I get more and more brazen about who I dare ask to be on this little 2-bit production. But yeah, yeah,
You know what? The thing that you learn if you stick around with this enough is that pretty much everybody has imposter syndrome.
yeah,
That's sort of the trick of this trade. You're talking about an industry that like there's no degree that you go to school for to prepare you to become a tabletop RPG
hmm,
designer, to become a freelancer. You just kind of do it.
yeah.
And because you just kind of do it, you never really quite feel like you're doing it right or the way you should
You know
be.
what?
So, you know, you don't worry about it. But yeah, so I was in Alien Archive
Mhm.
2, and what was the other one I did? Oh, I did Com. I was
Oh
huge in
yeah,
Com. So by the time Com came out, I was sort of like the established rules mechanic workhorse at Paizo,
yeah.
uh, just because I pumped out so much content, and Owen reviewed so much of my content. He knew the kind of stuff I could do. Owen and I have a business partnership outside of
Mhm.
Paizo. I am the publisher of Everybody Games. Owen is the publisher of Rogue Genius
Mhm.
Games, and we have a joint partnership where my products get published under the Rogue Genius Games banner. I'm my own company, my own entity, but it gives Owen like a vested interest in me doing well. It gives me access to Owen's like brand and the fact that like everybody knows who Owen Casey Stevens
No
is.
kidding.
So yeah, exactly. So because of that, he's like, oh, I reviewed all of these products. Oh, and we also did the very first Starfinder third party product, which was the Starfarer's Companion, if you've ever read
I
that
have
book.
it. Yep. Yep.
Um, yeah. So in that book, I updated a whole bunch of first edition Pathfinder stuff to Starfinder, along with my fellow freelancer and good friend Matt Morris, and Owen
Mhm.
added a bunch of cool stuff too. And so Owen by that point had like lots of experience reviewing my Starfinder work, and he was like, I want to bring in people that have never been in the industry on character operations manual,
Mhm.
but I know that bringing in new people means that they're going to need more development work. That's just the
Ah,
truth.
yep.
Newer freelancers need more work. Even if they are amazing at designing rules and are masters of the pen, they're not going to know all of Paizo's like in-house
Of
formatting and
course.
like whatnot. So he's like, I need someone who can be my workhorse and do a huge chunk of work so that I can train new people to be good, and so Paizo will have a better roster of freelancers for Starfinder. And so I looked at Owen on whatever camera app we were using at the time, and I was like, I will be your workhorse, Owen Casey Stevens. Flood me with Starfinder.
Yep.
And at that point in time, I had made all of these products for Everybody Games. Armory had come out. Gosh, what I did something in Armory. I don't remember. Oh, I did all the personal items in Armory. That's right. Um, and so I had all this experience doing this stuff, and but like a lot of the things I've told you between my core rulebook equipment and there are things like equipment, there are things like aliens. I didn't get to do player options because Starfinder didn't really put out a whole lot of player options in its first 2
Yep.
years. Was the big one,
Yeah.
and I was like, gimme,
Yeah,
gimme.
that was a
So
huge boon to the like it not that the game was at all tired, but you inject three new classes. It's like an
yeah,
MMO that's like, oh, you know what? Here's an island that you've never played. Oh, and you know what? You get to play three different things. I'm like, it was like people. I mean, I wasn't as involved in Discord back then when Com came out. I was still getting into the community of the Starfinder stuff, but when that book came out, it was like people were like, "This is what the game is supposed to be." Like, I don't know what the Paizo perception of it was, but as a fan, as a person who was trying to put on this little production here, it was like an expansion came out and it just completely rejuvenated. I had a couple players that they were like, it was Starfighter Society every week, and then just like pouring over the core classes.
hmm.
But when Com was announced and Com was teased and it finally came out, it was a spark, definitely.
Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is that um the core rulebook always ships what's needed at baseline to
Of
play
course,
the
yeah,
game, right?
yeah,
But in a lot of ways, you're just kind of setting up what you're expected to have in a core
hmm,
rulebook. It's really that first big players book that's the book that really sets the
yep,
tone for like what this game is going to be and what you can do in it. And so Com comes along, and we were basically told like, go crazy and we'll edit it so that it's balanced, but we have all of these ideas for things we want to
uh-huh.
see, and we want you to come with your ideas on the things that you want to see, and let's together make something that gives people an idea of what Starfinder can actually like
Hmm.
be with support. So one of the things I did a lot in this book, I was in charge of, so the book had two spreads for every species in the
Yes,
core
that
rulebook.
was another thing.
The
Yeah,
core ones and then
yeah,
the legacy ones. Yeah. And so for me, I did Sheeran and I did Yosoki were my
yeah.
two that I did. And then I didn't do any of the themes. Almost all the themes were done in-house or by new people, because a theme is either really thematic, go figure, and like the designers knew what they wanted already, or
Yeah.
it's really easy. And so if you have someone new that you're not sure of that you want to train, a theme is a
All
good
right.
place to train them. So they were like, Alex, we know you put a bid on the street rat theme. You're not getting it. We're giving you other stuff. And I was like, all right,
Yeah.
that's fine. And so instead, I got every class spread in that book except for mechanic and Solarian. So I got
Oh,
5 out of the
yeah.
7 of them. So pretty much anything that's come out for any of those classes that aren't in the mechanic and the
Mhm.
Solarian, those two spreads were done by um, her pen name is Sasha Harving. That's not her name that
Oh, yeah,
she
yeah. I
goes
know
by.
her.
But
Yeah, I know. I follow. I not like follow her, but yeah, yeah. She's in a couple of the discords I'm in, and she was the one that put me on
mhm.
to the occult guide. Like, I was like, yeah, yeah. I'm looking at stuff. I'm wanting to expand stuff, and then she sent me a couple links to some other stuff she's done, and I immediately bought them on drive through. So yeah, yeah. I do know. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, Not tangentially. I can't think of words, but yeah, yeah, I know her. I definitely familiar with her work.
Yeah, yeah. And so then there were those two, and I did all the other. I did pretty much everything else. So like, I'm the person who was like, "Hey, you know what?" Like, and this was something that I Owen and I had lots of discussions about this when Com was in playtesting. I was like, "Hey, Owen, I know that you said you want Biohacker to be a skills class. It can't be a skills class if you don't give it that insight bonus, that scaling insight
Mm-hmm.
bonus, like somewhere." And he was like, "No, no, that's just intended for the operative to have an edge." And I was like, "Yeah, but you gave that bonus to the mechanic, and the envoy's expertise scales at roughly the same rate if you go by die averages. Like that class, that poor unfortunate
Yeah.
biohacker, they're not going to be seen as a skills class if you don't give them a scaling bonus to skills that competes with the operatives. And at the end of the day, like Owen isn't I don't want to say that Owen didn't listen to me, because that's not
Mm-hmm.
true. Owen took my feedback into consideration and then made the decision based on the feedback given to him by thousands of play
Mm-hmm.
testers. So that ended up happening. And but regardless of that, like I'm like some of the stuff that I did in that book that is kind of crazy by like nowish
Mm-hmm.
standards. I'm the one who did the soldier abilities to swap gear boosts for other things like skill
Oh yeah.
bonuses and additional
Yeah.
skills. Um, I wrote the operative stunt and strike mechanic, which is supposed to be like, hey, do you want an operative that doesn't have studied
Mm-hmm.
strike or not studied strike,
Oh
trick
yep.
attack? Here's a trick that you can do. I wrote epiphanies. Epiphanies were my number one thing that I wanted going into this book. And I told Owen, I was like, I need you to give me Mystic. I need Mystic. I need the Mystic to have choices, and I know how to do it. And so he gave it to me, and Epiphanies are now a very important part of the Mystic playstyle.
Yes.
I
I'm
also
a huge Mystic fan. I'm a huge Sheeran fan. So like everything you've done, like has pleased me on a personal level. Just like all the variation I
Mhm.
can get. Real quick, I do want to make one quick correction. Sasha's pronouns
Sure.
are Nov. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, I I don't know if Nav uses different pronouns when Nav's going by Sasha.
Oh, my
I
bad.
know that
Okay.
for I actually don't know.
Okay.
I should probably ask Nav sometime
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I don't know if I know that their pen name that that Nav's traditionally
Hmm.
used she her, but
Okay.
we'll just use Nav for the
Yeah.
rest of it because I don't know, and I'd rather use the ones that I know that Nav
Yes. Yeah. I
prefers.
there was just a
Um,
conversation in a Discord server that I have that I share, and I was like, oh, I hadn't heard that pronoun, so I just want to be sure. Like, in the very off chance Nav listens to to me to this, I want to be sure. Like, I'm constantly respectful. Nav's been a great. Ambassador to the system because I typically don't go to people with my rules questions because I have players and I can bounce off them. But I just threw it like, hey, I'm doing this, and Nav's like, oh, you want this, this, and this, and that was Nav's drive through stuff. So yeah,
mhm,
I'll ask
mhm.
at another
I
point.
I don't. I don't blame you. Like you had just mentioned how I've done all of this like stuff for the game and like how influential I've been to your
Hmm.
characters. When I want to bounce a design idea for mechanics in Starfinder off someone, I usually bounce it off of Nav.
Yeah,
Like so, at least I trust Nav's design judgment enough that I'm going to throw my ideas in front of Nav.
absolutely.
I think that Nav's amazing,
Yeah.
so go for
All
it.
right.
But yeah, so like that's basically like com was sort of my big
Yeah.
thing that I had worked on. And then the other major contribution I've done is I'm one of the three what we'll call wave one freelancers on Starship Operations
Mm.
Manual. Um, that that book is interesting because it went through a couple of different development cycles. There was a time where it was conceived as being a very different, much smaller written product, and I was brought on along with Vanessa Hoskins and
Big fan
Hillary
of.
Moon Murphy to
Yep.
do, yeah, also great people to do that. And so like that book ended up going through a lot of development. It passed hands from Owen Casey Stevens to John Compton. John turned it into its modern form, and it's fantastic. And for me, the thing that is like my favorite contribution, nobody ever talks about it. I wrote the Tims. They're a
Oh
starship.
yeah.
Yeah, they're like a star. Originally, when I sat down, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to make a Tim for every feat and every selectable class feature,
Uh-huh.
and I sat down and I did one for every envoy improvisation and every envoy expertise talent,
Hmm.
and it was over 10 pages, and I had 8 pages for the section. So I was like, well. Yes, this isn't gonna get in this, so I cut it back to just the feats from the core rulebook,
Hmm.
and I think calm. But I really like it. I think one of the places where Starship Combat runs into some difficulty is that if you sit down and play Starship Combat, it doesn't really feel like you're playing your character. You're just kind of playing their skill ranks.
Yes.
Your choices don't really matter a whole lot, and I wanted Tim's to try to be a way to help like players who wanted their feat choices to matter to work. I'm also the person who wrote the squadron rules,
Oh my
so
God.
the
Yes.
if you want to play, and I it was my idea. It was I
Oh
in
yeah.
my original draft. I was like, you know, and again, like I said, I submitted to Owen. It got passed to John. So when I submitted this to Owen, I said, Owen, I hope you know I can't give you a squadron combat rule set without an option that lets all the squadron ships fly together and form Voltron. Like I can't. Like it's legally not allowed for me to not put Voltron into this
Yeah.
book. And like at the time, Tech Revolution, which will be out in like a month or so
Hmm.
from our recording date, that had just been announced, and so like I was like, I don't know if we can do this because you know there's no mech rules in the game yet, and you clearly are going to do it in Tech Revolution if you do it
Hmm.
anywhere. But I'm putting the Form Voltron rules right here. Please don't stop me. And that's important because anybody could stop me.
Yeah.
Like my work goes to the developers and then I don't see it until it's
Yep.
published. So anyone could have stopped me from putting Voltron in this book, but at the end of the day, they were like, no, farm Voltron. And now you can farm Voltron in Starfinder.
Oh yeah, I fuck and yeah, there's gonna be swears. Like I like I don't want this to turn into like I appreciated the hell out of what Starship Combat was as a Star Trek fan. It scratches my itch so good. I understand how some people could be turned off by it. I try to champion. I try instead of like like pointing out like yes this is bad, that this is difficult, or I don't ever like to say bad, but like spin it, like you have to get into it, like you don't watch Star Trek and they're just bored, you have to animate. And what Squadron did was it brought Star Wars Rogue Squadron was one of my first I say modern but late 90s video games that I was good at. So like that kind of shit, when I'm
Mhm.
like, we're gonna have this, right? It wasn't there. I'm like, it's fine. I'm keeping the faith. I got a Star Trek bridge crew. I'm good to go. And then yeah, you're right. So looking at the Tims, I've used them a fair bit. I haven't gotten to do much on the podcast with Space Combat because of uh, the current group. We've done a couple tests of it to see if they're going to do it in an entertaining way. The previous group, I ran a test of Starship Combat and they didn't want to do anything but one wanted to be a pilot and everyone else just wanted to be on guns, and I'm like sitting there, head in my hands, like as a Star Trek guy, like you don't want to scan enemy vessel for no okay. So like we just never got around to that, and then the pandemic happened, and that group that was an in person group, and once that happened, like I'm going online, and people that want to do like I approach people like there may be Starship Combat. I don't need you to love it, but I need you to to bear with me, you know.
You know, I like the core of the
Yeah.
combat. You know, I do. I think that it's
Yeah.
fine. There are a couple places where I think Starship Combat runs into some tricky points that make it a hard sell on
Mm-hmm.
players, and there are definitely places that I think that at some point they should be ironed out. Specifically, I think that there's too much fidelity in building a starship. It takes way too long.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you've ever sat down with a group of players, a group of new players,
Yeah.
and shown them, like, literally, I run a home game. I run a home game called Teenage Wasteland, where I gave them a starship baseline, and they were like, well, can we customize and upgrade it? I was like, well, yeah, you leveled up, you can customize it. And they were like, all right, how do I do that? I
Oh.
was like, well, here's the book. And so I had a player sit down, read the rules cover to cover, make a starship, and then when he was done, he told me he never wanted to touch starships again after trying to build that starship.
Yeah.
And it's a
Yeah.
lot. It's intimidating. I think that it doesn't really need to have that much fidelity into it to be a good
Mm-hmm.
system. I think that you mentioned that your players are very drawn to gunnery and
Mm-hmm.
piloting. I think that in addition to those two roles being the most cinematic roles in things like Firefly, Star
Sure.
Wars, Star Trek, those two roles are also the ones with the most mechanical weight behind what they do in Starship
Yeah.
Combat. The piloting is the one who takes control of all the movement and makes the bulk of the checks in their phase. They are the superstars of the piloting
Yeah.
phase. And the gunners are the ones that actively take down enemies. But like the captain's only role is to give a very small bonus to other people once per
Yeah.
turn. And the engineer will repair what can and science officer both kind of do similar things in rebalancing shields or getting rid of
Yeah.
glitches. I mean, the scanning stuff is cool, but like oftentimes a lot of the information you get from an initial scan isn't stuff that's super helpful to you. It's like, I know how many people are on that
Yeah.
starship. Awesome, that's how many gunners are going to shoot me now. Hooray. and and so like I think that like the weight of what each action does and what it contributes to a fight needs to be
Mm.
reassessed. And honestly, I think the best way to do that is at some point we need to be willing to sit down and say there needs to be a cap on how many actions the starship can take each turn. That because like right now it's just as long as you have as many people, you can take as many actions as you have people that can take roles on the starship,
Yes.
essentially. And I think that balancing an actual action economy for the starship is kind of what it needs in order to make some of this work a little bit better so you can push more power into those options. And then I think the last thing that it really needs is it needs a alternate progression system that doesn't take away from like your class, your actual
Mm.
character, but that lets you specialize in different roles. The D20 engine has always been a game about character building and customization and specialization, and I think that making it so that if you have two people in your party who have the same piloting ranks, you have basically are equally effective as pilots is something that isn't great about the system. I would say that almost like how Pathfinder Second Edition gives class feats and skill feats at the same
Oh
time,
yeah.
you almost need like a character feat and like a
Starship feet.
starship
Yeah.
world
Yeah.
feat. Yeah. And so I think that there are things that they can do, but like obviously these are all
Of
hindsight rules that
course.
either you would have to be a third party publisher like me to do something about, or you would have to wait for Paizo to do something about it in a new edition. Um, I don't like, I mean, in general, Paizo's not, and companies in general, I say Paizo, but companies in general aren't in the business of invalidating their
Of
previous
course.
rule books. Like, you don't want to, you don't want to put out a book that's like, hey, you know that whole big
Yeah.
chapter in the core rule book that
Yeah.
doesn't work
You
without
spent
this.
$50 on this book. $15 of it is no longer valid. Like an MMO can just patch and like here's the changes with
Yep.
TTRPGs, pen and paper games. Like it's it compendiums, player compendiums like you were talking about could do the trick, but like completely retooling it, like people we're still selling core rulebooks, guys. We can't unprint that.
Mhm.
That genie's out of its bottle.
And hey, that's why race is still a thing in Starfinder, right? And that's
Yes.
why my Kickstarter project that we talked about almost 20 minutes ago
Excellent
is
segue. I
is
was
that's
I was looking for a way to hop in and get back to the yeah. So perfect.
I did it.
Yeah,
Woo!
nailed it.
I told you I've experienced as a podcast host.
Very good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, all of your work has come to this moment where tell me a little bit, because I completely agree. And when Pathfinder 2e came out, when it switched to ancestors, I'm like, oh hell yes! Like I always felt like a
Yeah.
little squick of like, oh, that's your race. I'm like, ooh, we're in sci-fi
Yeah.
realm. Can we call species? And so yeah, so please tell me about uh, the
Yeah. So I
hotness.
mean, let's be real about that particular thing too.
Hmm.
I know a lot of people who are like, "Oh, it's
Yeah.
tradition, you call them race." And it's like, but that word actively hurts people,
Hmm.
and it's not accurate in a age of high science.
Yes.
Like, race is an artificial construct that is based on equal measures of ethnic and customs. It has no bearing. Like, and you're talking about ancestry for Pathfinder second edition. I think ancestry is a fine
Yeah.
word, and obviously I think that they didn't go with species because species sounded too sci-fi to them.
Precisely.
Ancestry sounds a little better, but like when I hear of ancestry, I think of like my parents and like my personal
Hmm.
lineage. And I don't know if I would consider like my ancestry as a person to be human. If you're talking about actual real words in the English language, I think species is the best word for what we're trying to convey. And the fact that it's appropriate for Starfinder and Starfinder doesn't use it is weird.
Yeah.
Having not having a race hurts. Like, having race as a mechanic hurts people. It's uncomfortable. It brings up a lot of not great stuff, and it's not even the right word for what you're trying to talk
Hmm.
about. So last year I started a product line for Everybody Games called Starlog Deluxe, and Starlog Deluxe is like my minis line. Essentially, it's anywhere from 2 pages to like 20, depending on how big I want to go. And it was called Starlog Deluxe Legacy or Core Species Reforged. And the idea was that it took the core species in the Starfinder core rulebook, starting at the ones in chapter 2, I think it is, and just took them and rebuilt them from the ground up using a species mechanic that is designed to work and play a little bit like a combination of the race builder from Pathfinder First Edition, the alternate racial traits rules from Starfinder, and the ancestry rules from Pathfinder Second Edition. The species rules that are in this book that we are kickstarting, they are not a carbon copy of anything that has come out since before them. But if you look at them, you'll see, oh, I can see where these ideas came from. So part of the idea is that when you pick your species, and that's like basically the type of creature you are. So let's say you sit down and you're like me or you, and you like foxes, so you're going to pick
Hmm.
kitsune. It's one of the featured species in the book. There's 6 pages of kitsune content you can
Oh yeah.
use to build your character. And so you start down, you sit with that. The first thing you get is there's a nice little paragraph that gives a very brief overview. This book is not flavor heavy, and that's by design. I want anybody to be able to use this book in any setting. By default, the book will make references to Everybody Games's Starfinder campaign setting, which is Blood Space. And but it's not anywhere near so much that you absolutely need to follow what
Mhm.
we say. It's just kind of like, hey, if you're into blood space, here's some stuff on how we use this content and like what it means in the context of our world.
And a little bit
I'd
of
say
cross
maybe 700.
merchandising never killed anyone, right?
Right, and it's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah.
It's a lot of fun
Yeah, I bought them
to write about
leading
stuff.
up to this. I have them. I'm gonna be buying. I was looking at your product line. I'm like, okay, I should probably get that because, uh, like I'll dig your work. The art is awesome, but so I'm looking at it now, and so much 6 pages of each is and
Yeah.
lack of
So
flavor. So
the
like that's gonna be, I don't know if dense is the right word, but like I love just just I mean I'm a content glutton, but
That's fair. The way that it's designed is that like every single option that you pick starts with like a line of flavor that explains how it kind of fits
mhm,
in. So there's flavor in there, but it's not the focus
of
by any
course.
means. This is the opposite of a Lost Omens product in second edition. They are flavor with sprinklings of
Mhm,
crunch. This is crunched with a hint of flavor. Like, give me that
yeah.
crunch. And so the idea is that you start when you're making your character and you pick their species. Your species will determine your size. It'll determine your type, your subtypes, and how many starting hit points that you add in addition to like, your classes stuff, just like it is in the core
Mhm,
game. One thing that's different about species in this book that is completely removed, there are no ability adjustments for your species. And the book has rules for how to do ability scores without
mhm,
them. Essentially, you just get 12 points at first level instead of 10, and all everything else is the
mhm,
same. The idea is that in Starfinder the math is so tight that that -2 penalty that so many species have can make a character class unplayable for
yes.
some from some races in the base game. I had a good friend who loves androids, made an android envoy for
Mm,
Starfinder
mhm,
Society, and did great playing her, but there was always like, hey, you are essentially 4 charisma down what you could be, and that kind of sucks to know. He is James is a trooper. James is awesome. If you ever watch No Direction Beyond, I'm talking about James Ballard, great friend of mine, my co-host on No Direction Beyond, knows all about Starfinder. Maybe is more okay with making those suboptimal decisions than I
mhm,
am, but like for me, I was like, no, that would make me feel bad that like there's an arbitrary reason why my character isn't as good as someone else in this
right.
thing. And what's worse is that as Starfinders come out, they've put out alternate ability
Mhm.
adjustments for
Oh yeah.
species. So so it's almost like it's arbitrary at this point. So I just got rid of it. Like there's no reason to have it, in my opinion. And since I'm writing this book, my opinion means something. So you get all of those things, and then the book actually goes out of its way to give you species traits. Like these are things that you have, they are features of your physical body because of who you are, what you have. These are the rules for them. And how it's balanced is that everything there's you get one thing that's valued at about the power level of a feat, and you get another thing that's valued at the power level of about half a feat. And then there's also two more things you get. You get a trait that tells you what you breathe. So, like for
Mhm,
Kitsune, they get the air breathing universal creature rule. And they get a trait that tells them what their movement speed is. And so there's a trait that says Kitsune have a base speed of 30 feet. So for a Kitsune, if you pick that species, you're getting medium size. You're getting the humanoid type with the shape changer and Kitsune
mhm,
subtypes, and you are getting 4 hit points per for your character because you don't get hit points anywhere else pretty much in this
mhm,
game. And then you also get change shape, which is valued at about a feet, and you get low light vision, which is about half a feet in its power. And then that is what you get for your species until you move on to the next section. The next section is your heritage, and your heritage is something you have for your origins. And heritages tend to be deceptive in this book because if you're in one of the 6-page featured species sections, you're getting a full page of them. It's usually about 6 to 9 choices. But then the book also has 30 universal heritages, which are heritages that are selectable by one or more species. Some universal heritages are things like Asmar or Tiefling or Designer Child that literally anybody
mhm.
can have. Others are things like Skitter Goblin, where it only makes sense for goblins and Skittermanders
Of
to have it.
course.
Yeah, Skitter Goblin is in this book, by the
I'm
way,
looking at the
because
posting now. I'm like, yep, I recognize that. I recognize that.
yep,
I do have just one.
yep,
What are
sure, go
blood
ahead.
scarred? I'm not familiar with that.
Blood Scarred. So Blood Scarred is probably the only thing in that whole
Uh huh.
listing that is specific to our campaign
Oh,
setting, the
okay.
Blood Space campaign setting. In the Shah Osoro region of space, which is our fictional star
Hmm.
system in the greater galaxy of Starfinder. Basically, what happened is that you have two binary stars, and then during the Nova Age, which is not exactly like the Gap, but it's comparable
Hmm.
to it. It's basically what the Gap would have been for this region, but called
Oh,
something
I love
different with
that.
slightly different
God,
effects.
yes.
Yeah, so the reason it's called the Nova Age is because one of the two binary stars that the system is named for, Osoro, went So say it when supernova isn't correct because it imploded and then what was left over exploded outward.
Okay.
So the you basically have in this system you have a sun and a black hole that orbit each other. The black hole is only about a mile in
Mm-hmm.
size because it still has the same mass it had as a star.
Gotcha.
So it's this itty bitty little black hole, but the two of them orbit each other
Ah,
constantly.
okay.
And when Osoro collapsed into a black hole, a lot of its material exploded outwards. And for reasons that nobody really understands or knows, what exploded outward was this like stardust nebula that's blood red and is tainted with demonic corruption. And so as this nebula exploded out from the star, it washed over the star system and caused all sorts of terrible mutations and changes to all the different worlds and moons in the Shao solar system. One of the side effects of that is that some people, if they are born to parents who have been exposed to blood space, they'll be what's called blood scarred, where blood basically, like if you had said you have our advanced
Mm-hmm.
occult guide, if you read through that book, blood scarring is basically what happens to people who are exposed to the stuff that causes blood madness, one of the corruptions in the
Ah.
book. So yeah, it's actually one of the nastier corruptions in that
Yeah,
book too.
to be honest
But
with you, like I skimmed the corruption thing. I'm like, oh no, I couldn't do this to my players. But
you no, no, you gotta do it. You owe it to yourself to do that to your players. The book is very much designed that getting rid of corruptions is possible but not fun. There are cure methods for each of them
yeah,
that are listed, and there's a magic item that you can use that you can say, hey players, just go hang out in this pod for a few days. There's a cost to it, both in money and your body, but you can get the corruption purged. I've corrupted Dustin Knight, one of our No Direction staff members already. He survived. He was bedridden for about a month in game, but he
you know what?
survived.
You've convinced me. Spoiler for any of
Do
my
it.
players
Corrupt both of
listening. One of you is gonna get corrupted next season. Ha ha
them. Do it.
ha.
You know, as long as one of them can carry the bodies home, you can corrupt more than
Oh,
one.
you know, Tally's pretty strong.
Exactly. I like the way you think. All right, so
So yeah, I'm yeah
but yeah,
looking
so
at
that's
the
essentially what.
that is awesome. Like all of that, uh, that's like it's so freeing. Like it's like mix and match. I love it. And
Yeah,
let me do a quick.
and so like those are your heritages,
Mhm.
right? In addition to those, you get to pick two talents at first level, and all. So heritages, I forgot to mention, are about as powerful as a feat, just like those talents that you got from previously, and that are just like your traits that you got previously. And all of those talents that you're picking are also about as powerful as a feat. It's sort of one of the things that kind of I won't say drove me crazy, but one of the things that I think is tricky about Pathfinder Second Edition is that all the different feats have, and all the different abilities have different power levels. In Pathfinder Second Edition, heritages are much more powerful than your ancestry feats in terms of what they
Mhm.
do. And it means that if you give an ability as a heritage, you can feel like you're missing out if you don't pick it at first level. Like,
Right.
I can never get that awesome cool power again. So the idea here is that there are a lot of heritages that just say, your family is XYZ, you gain this
Hmm.
talent. And so some of the heritages will just give you a bonus talent. And so that way you can choose, oh hey, I have this talent because my origins, it's part of my family line, or I have this talent because I learned how to do it later. It's not part of my family, but it's something I wanted to do or that I acquired later. So they're balanced around the same power level so that they're easier to mix and match, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. You know, maybe you could flavor it like they grew into it. Like, oh, you know, I now that I've hit a certain
Mm-hmm.
maturity, you know, I unlock this gift. You know, and there's so
Mm-hmm.
much you can do with that. So, looking at it, I'm not trying to rush or anything, but just looking at this here, I'm looking at the art. You got all this 30 featured species, 15 additionals,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
30 universal heritages, dozens of talents, alternate rules, and more. I see a lot of stretch goals, a fair few stretch goals kind of detailed here. Is there anything? So you said you started this last year. So has this been your pandemic baby?
No, the Advanced Occult Guide was my
Ah,
pandemic baby.
okay,
This is like that was like the first child. This is the second child.
nice.
Like once the Advanced Occult Guide skipped, I was like, all right, I think I want to do this because this is the kind of project that like I could probably go and release a couple of species every, quarter or
Mhm.
so and be all right. But it's really hard to predict what people will want. And so like I ran into this thing where like I did the core species and that was easy. Everybody wanted the core species, and then I did the legacy species, and everybody's a fan of elves and dwarves and dragons and all that cool
Mhm.
stuff. So that was easy too. And so then I did blood space species, and I was like, all right, the blood space species are mostly the greatest hits from the Starfarer's companion. So that was easy because I knew people wanted that because the Starfarer's companion when we did it was one of our highest selling products ever. Like I don't remember whether it's Electrum or Platinum on Drive Through RPG, but it's like pretty high up there. We still get sales on that like 3 or 4 years later now.
Nice.
And so that was easy. And so then I was like, all right, what am I going to do next? Oh, I know. People like Morlamaw, Kate Baker's babies are
Yes,
super
more
popular.
Lamar. Yep.
And Ranieri are
Yeah.
popular. People like Louise Loza's babies. And then I'll just put Kahlo in there. And so I put these aquatic species reforged, these 3 aquatic species together, shipped it, not
Oh,
popular. Like,
oh man.
'cause- yeah. So to me, that doesn't necessarily mean that people don't want it.
Yeah.
I think that means that people are like, okay, well, like, there's not as much of a draw. And so a project like this is best served on Kickstarter where we can all kind of work together to get the things we want,
Mhm.
right? Like, Bob down the street might not want more Lamar, while Cassidy up the street might want them. But and if they're in separate and if they're like separate books that only Cassidy's going to buy it, that might not actually happen because it's just Cassidy. But if we put them in one book together, then both of them are buying that book for the thing that they want in it. And theoretically, that means the Kickstarter will have a better chance of succeeding. Does that make
No, that
sense?
makes perfect sense. I was looking through the drive-through RPG, looking for the Brennery, Morlama, and Callow. Uh,
It's called Starlog Deluxe Aquatic Species Reforged. It would be the name of that book.
thanking you because I am a not to like any sort of like obsessed degree. Like Sheeran are my hands down favorite species out
Mhm.
there. But like the introduction of the Morlama was one of the first uh, Starfinder Society things scenarios I ran, and the people did
Mhm.
not see the twist coming. So it was not the reveal, not really a twist, but the reveal of what they were
Yeah.
doing down there was so good. Like it kind of had a special attachment to it. The Callow in that same
Mhm.
scenario, the tragedy of the Manta Core. Minor spoiler for a session that hasn't been recorded yet, but I'm going to have a group of Starfinders, aquatic races, species rather. See, I'm guilty of it.
Uh-huh.
Uh, wanting to form a second Manta Core in honor of the fallen ones. So, and then I don't. It's rare that I've met someone who doesn't go anime eyes over the Brennery. Like people just love them some otter
They're
people.
great.
Yeah,
Oh, they're
yeah.
amazing. And it's actually funny. One of the things I did for this Kickstarter that you're gonna get the scoop on because I don't think maybe a couple of my patrons know, and that's
Mhm.
about it. But I recorded some interviews with some of the freelancers that I'm hiring to help me with this.
Oh,
One of them is Louise Loza.
nice.
Louise Loza is going to be doing the expansion of the Brenneri if this funds. So I have all of the stuff I wrote in the original product, which was the Aquatic Races Reforged that I
Hmm.
mentioned. But Louise is going to be adding about 3,000 additional
What?
words, which is 4 pages of new stuff. So, yeah.
Oh,
So,
that's
if you want to
awesome.
see Louise write more about his favorite otter people, also in that very short, it's like 5 or 6
Hmm.
minutes, nothing like this one that we're
Yeah.
doing. But in that short little interview, Louise discloses the secret origins of where the Brenneri species name comes from. If you ever
I
wanted to
have
know.
any time I because I'm not an etymologist. I don't have any college learning outside of what I see on TV and movies. But like I look at things, I'm like, okay, I can kind of see where uh, uh, inspiration for the name may have came from. Morlama, Brennery are two of them that were not. But Brennery, I'm like, what the hell are you? I did a thing last season of our podcast where they run into an alien anthill, and I didn't want to just use Formians because I love my players, but
Mhm.
some of them have a little too much knowledge in their brains, so I wanted to change up the Formians. So I made Aculians. Formians is a part of the ant taxonomy. I went a little higher up in the taxonomical classification, so they were a displaced kind of progenitor to what the Formians are, but they're just kind of like, kingdom phylum class. This is boring for everyone, including me.
Mhm.
But like, I just went a little higher up, and like, these people are displaced. They were hiding from the swarm, and maybe they have connections to the Formians. But like, so I know where like etymology comes into play when naming some species. Brennery, I'm going to be listening to that as soon as we get off of here because I'm excited to hear that.
I will tell you, it has nothing to do with scientific
Oh no, I know
nomenclature, and that
because
is
I looked up, I looked up the Latin taxonomy of otters. I'm like, I
the
don't see it anywhere, guys. I can't.
the the answer is very wholesome, but it's also an answer that probably no one would have expected. It's really good.
Oh, it's adorable.
I Yeah, and so I have there's a an interview with Louise that's coming.
Hmm.
There's Owen Casey Stevens recorded. It's not really an interview. I'd call it an endorsement is probably the best way to describe it.
Hmm.
And it's a lovely endorsement. And then I have an interview with Dustin Knight, and I have one with Joshua Hennington. I have one with Tinika Bowman,
Oh, big fan.
amazing
Yeah, yeah,
author.
yeah,
Yeah. And then I'm still trying to schedule it, but the last one that I'm hoping that we'll be able to do because he wants to do it and I want to do it, but it's kind of more like our schedules are just
yeah.
clashing. Is Quinn Murphy,
Oh yeah,
and fingers
yeah,
crossed
yeah.
that I'm going to be able to get
Yeah,
that
I'm
one.
familiar with all
But
those names. I see them all the time. I do when I'm not doing this. I play GM and edit Star Rollers with Allison Seib and
Mhm.
Tanique.
Tinica,
Tenica,
yeah.
thank you. I'm looking at him like my brain just kind of flatlined for a moment. She's going to be GMing uh, 114, one of the quests that she wrote for that. I think it's 114.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, we're going to get the actual authors to GM their scenarios for our little podcast. And I love the community. I love how everyone's like, we're just trying to put out content, but also like make as much time to have fun within the community
Mhm.
as well. So I'm looking forward to all of those.
Listen, here's the dirty little secret, and maybe this will help your imposter
Eh,
syndrome. But like, real talk, all of us are attention starved.
fair.
So like if you go and you ask any freelancer if they want to do something, you have a reasonable chance that
Yeah.
they'll say yes, like that they'll be interested in being on a podcast. So go for it. You should just ask all of them. Be like, yo, Tinica, come and talk with me for an hour and 30 minutes or
Yeah, I
whatever.
have a bit of a back.
And Tinica,
Go ahead.
yeah, Tinica will be like, schedule it in time so that I'm awake because I live in the Netherlands. And
Oh, yep.
yes.
Yep. Yeah,
Good
yeah,
stuff.
part of her scheduling has been like scheduling is weird because Allison is in the UK or Scotland.
Mhm.
No, UK. She's from Scotland.
Yes.
Yeah. So scheduling across the world with these games is difficult. So yeah, I will definitely start hitting up more people. I've got a fair bit of backlog, but I will say I'm going to. There's going to be almost no editing to this one. I'm just going to throw in quick intro, outro music and get this up as soon as possible, so I can help get the word out. We're not a big podcast. We're just a fun homebrew adventure. But like what following I have, I want and need people to see that there's a better way to play. Not, there's a better alternative, and just the sheer being spoiled for choice of all the various talents and customizations you can do. I'm excited to see this come out and have my players. So let me ask you kind of a mechanic standpoint. Like, say I approach my players, I'm like, hey, here's this book. I paid money for it. Not that I would use that as a bargaining chip, but like I'm gonna buy it anyway.
I paid
Yeah.
money for
Like say I have a group and some of them are keen on it and some of them aren't. Is there going to be like, and I'm not too worried about balance. I'll just add HP if it's unbalanced to an encounter. But like,
Mhm.
is there, so as a mechanics guy, is there going to be any discrepancy between PCs that choose to go this route versus those that remain for whatever reason?
The answer to that question is yes. There will be some discrepancies.
Hmm.
However, if you see any major discrepancies, you'll probably notice them more at low level, and they will kind of fade out as you get higher.
Okay.
Now, that being said, I am sure that there are purists who are going to want to play the rules as they are published by
Yeah,
Paizo.
possibly.
I have not met any of them.
Good.
I actually play tested this rule set. I run a homebrew Starfinder game with aforementioned Dustin Knight and a bunch of my
Hmm.
friends from gaming, called Teenage Wasteland. So we got a lot. And basically I started out, and at the beginning of that game, the alien character deck hadn't come out yet,
Ah, yeah.
and even if it had, they hadn't announced that Kitsune were one of the
Uh
races
huh.
in it. But I had two players who wanted to play Kitsune, so I was like, all right, you're using these rules. And so I gave them the rules from Starlog Deluxe, or Blood Space
Hmm.
Species Reforged. And so like, here are the rules. We're low levels, so you just get those two traits. It's
Hmm.
basically indistinguishable at that low level. And there's an alternate rule set in the book that'll be like, hey, you can give your players bonus traits as they level up if you want to give them more. I'm currently using that,
Nice.
and at the point where we hit level 5, I let all of the people who were not using, first of all, none of them realized that my two Kitsune players were using a completely different
Hmm.
rule set than them. None of them were like, oh, they're more powerful. I just didn't tell them.
Yeah.
They didn't know. And they're like, oh, cool. And then when they all leveled up to level 5, I was like, we're going to use the free trait rules. And as part of that, all of you can retrain your character class into the new
Nice.
rules. And so all of them were able to perfectly translate their original
Hmm.
characters from the baseline species to the new rules with no
Oh, cool.
hiccups. The rules are designed so that you can go through and you can just find the abilities that your species normally gets for the most
Sure.
part and just slap them
Gotcha.
on. There are some there are some exceptions, like a lot of the racial traits in Starfinder that just give flat +2s race bonuses to stuff. In Starfarer Species Reforged, most of them will give you that skill as a class skill first, and if it's already a class skill, then it gives you the +2
Yep.
species bonus. Um, and that ends up working out to being a net bonus for those
Mm.
players, right? Because if you are a player who does not have that skill as a class skill, then getting a +2 from your trait is not as good as getting a +3 from having it as a class skill all of a sudden. That's a
Yeah.
benefit to you. And then you get an extra +1. And then if you are a player who took a class that already has that class skill, then you get the normal +2. The math doesn't change. It's just a little way to boost up the floor from people who don't have class skills.
Perfect.
And then there are a couple species that got a little bit better. The one that comes to mind is that humans don't have skill or have bonus skill points as a baseline ability. Actually, humans in general are they're going to look more powerful, but it's because the rest of the species were kind of brought up to be more equivalent to
Ah,
humans.
okay.
Because you have all these traits and all these choices, the bonus feat isn't as strong in Starfarer Species Reforged. Like, so humans still get a bonus feat, but it doesn't need to be like their entire racial trait bonus allocation like it is in Starfinder, where they only get the bonus feat and the skill points and nothing else. Because everybody else has so much choice, one of the things that I got in feedback and playtesting was that humans felt kind of weak if they didn't actually have like another
Hmm.
ability. So humans have this ability that's based off of real world biology called Pursuer. And what Pursuer does is that it goes along the idea that of all the species in Starfinders, humans evolved as pursuit predators, and so they get bonuses to Constitution checks to make forced
Oh,
marches to run past when they're supposed to, and it's a very small
yeah.
bonus. Like, it's about as good as low light vision, but you have this extra idea that like the human benefit isn't just that you're flexible and you get this bonus feat because like they're just so varied. You're also just really good at not stopping. Like, you're really, and like all the other species in the game, like by the point where like a kitsune, a dwarf, an elf, by the time they're tired from their marching, a human might be able to still
Yeah.
be going, but if their bonuses are good enough. You like, and it's just a little bit of extra flavor that helps make humans feel a little bit more exceptional without giving them tons of power. And if you want those bonus skill points, you can still take them. One of the reasons why it's a talent now instead of being a trait, or like a thing that they
Mm.
all get, is so other species give bonus skill points too. Humans just have the most flexible version of it, where they can put it them anywhere. Other species are like, you have to use them in these specific skills, and that's fine.
Gotcha. I may actually make a human for the first time in my Starfinder
Yeah,
experience.
you you can do it. Be, be the token
Yeah.
human. There's no reason not to
All
anymore.
right.
The thing is like I said, it doesn't really feel all that more powerful to be a human. And human has some really good options. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. I have two human players in Teenage Wasteland, my homebrew game,
Mhm.
and one of them has an option called coordinated cooperation is what it's called. And basically, if you use aid another or a similar action to give a bonus to somebody, then the bonus is better if you have that talent, and you can take it multiple times. It's like increases the bonus by one every time you take it up to two. And that's been really helpful to that player because that player tends to roll like garbage on attack rolls, so they just try to aid and harry. So yeah, like I don't think I can't say there's a single species that I personally feel is left out. All of them have a lot of love and
Of
attention put
course.
into
Yeah.
them. But if you made me pick a species that I think got the most out of this book so far, and I say so far because not all of it is written
Mm.
yet, obviously, that answer is Dragonkin.
Oh yeah.
Dragonkin got a complete rewrite from how they appeared in Starlog Deluxe, um, Legacy Species Reforged. Like in that book, they only had 2 pages, not a lot of room to do stuff with them. In this book, fans who have been a customer of mine for a very long time, like literally since the beginning, will see that like Dragonkin kind of low key got the Dragon Sept rules from my one of my very first products called Dragon Companion Handbook, which that it was a Pathfinder first edition book that was designed to let you take dragons basically as animal companions. It gave you rules for just playing a regular old dragon. Like it was very popular back in its
Yeah.
heyday. And the dragonkin in the Starfarer species Reforged, in addition to the standard traits, one of their traits is called Dragon Sept, where you get to pick basically what clan of dragon that you are from. And so if you want to be an adamantine dragonkin, you could be an adamantine dragonkin, and you get a list of abilities that are inspired by the dragonkin dragon graft from Alien Archive 4. There are septs that correlate to every metallic graft, every chromatic graft, every outer graft, and
Star
every
metal.
star metal
Nice.
graft. So some of them are very good. If you don't like magic, you should probably go No Quill Dragonkin.
Oh
You are
yeah.
very good. You are very good at resisting magic, and so, another species that has a very similarly complex build, because for the most part they're very simple, like what I described for the
Mhm.
kitsune, but uplifted animal and dragonkin are the two most complex so far, where they have an additional mechanic that you pick
Of
from,
course.
that's part of their budget. The uplifted animal, think uplifted bear, but it's designed that you can uplift any animal you can imagine. You literally just sit down. You get to pick how big your uplifted animal is. You get to pick what type of creature it is. Different talents are more appropriate for predators or prey animals. Like you could do basically whatever you want. If you want to be a lumbering elephant dragon person who's huge, you can do that with the rule set. If you want to be a diminutive mouse person who is no taller than the rest of the party's like
Raxolite.
shin bone,
Yeah.
yeah, you can do that too. If you want to be Puss in Boots, you can be Puss in Boots. The and the heritages for that one, I think I'm the most proud of them more than anything else, because the heritages are designed not really to explain your family, but how you were uplifted. So you have like cybernetically enhanced
Oh,
as one of the choices,
nice.
which is basically your rocket
Of
raccoon.
course. Yeah.
Someone took you apart and put you back
Yeah.
together. Like one of them is accursed. You are literally the beast in Beauty and the Beast. You are uplifted because someone turned you into an
Yep.
animal. There's one where someone took your brain out of your body and implanted it into an animal brain.
Oh.
Like one of them is you were blessed by a kami, and you as a who that let you live longer, and you live for 100 years, and in line with Japanese mythology, you gained sapience because you lived so long. Like there are literally like so many, just all of them explain how you were uplifted, and it's great. And maybe the answer is your parents were uplifted, and this is one of the flavor sections I mentioned for this part of the
Mhm.
book. One of the flavor sections describes the difference between evolution versus basically being engineered as an uplifted animal, and how like uplifted animals tend to look different. And depending on how you were uplifted, your kids might not necessarily be uplifted with you and might need to undergo like actual surgery to be sapient. Like an uplifted bear who had their body retaken apart and put back together, if it was just by like mechanical means, like they're not going to produce a viable offspring, to have a child without like actual like therapy. But that doesn't apply to all of them. If you were biologically augmented, like genetically re-engineered, your kids might be fine. And there's just a whole bunch of just compared to some of the other stuff, like all of them have flavor, all of them have story, but the amount of just inspiration that is in that uplifted animal section is so good.
And people.
I'm
No,
sorry,
no,
I
no,
kind
you're
of
good.
gushed
I
for a
just
bit.
know we're getting close to your kind of cutoff time, so I'll start to wrap this up. Uh, Thank you, Alex, again for joining us. Everyone, check out the Starfarer Species Reforged on Kickstarter. I'll be linking it. I'm going to be a little annoying this month about it because this is a very important added flavor to it. I'm very excited to offer this to my players. I do know two of them use Hero Labs online, so my little hesitation about balance. I can kind of see the Hero Labs users may be a little like it's not in our app because they also don't
That's
choose
fair.
certain equipment and spells. My mystic chooses not to use a Archives of Nethys or the Hidden Truth to expand their spell choice. So I just I'm anticipating a little bit of pushback on this, but everyone else I'm excited to see what options they can cook up. But yeah, Kickstarter. It'll be on all the social medias for this month. It ends June 30th. So
Yes. At the stroke of 12 on July
mhm,
1st, it will be
cool.
over. The minute it turns over, boom, done.
They are
Disappear.
just full disclosure at time of recording on the day one is at 3,400 or 3,443 out of the $5,000 goal. I'm definitely going to be back in this bad boy as soon as I deal with my rent, and I definitely want to see some
That's
of
okay.
those
Don't
stretch
don't go
goals.
homeless from me.
No, no, of course not. But no, I definitely want to support this because this is going to be dope. So, where can we find you on social media?
Sure, I'll be happy to tell you. I have two Twitter accounts. One of them is for Everybody Games. That's at EB Games LLC. A very important LLC. I am not Electronics Boutique. I had someone message me yelling at me about some Canadian purchase. I'm like, that ain't me. The other one is you can find me on Twitter at ALJAUG. It's Al J Og.
Mm-hmm.
Which is my personal Twitter handle. Both of those work fine for
Okay.
me. You can also find me on NoDirectionPodcast.com, where I do a bi-weekly blog called Guidance. I often give Starfinder tips on that. And you can also see my podcast on NoDirectionPodcast.com, and we stream it on Twitch on once up a month on Wednesdays when we record. Last, I have a Facebook for Everybody Games. I think it's gaming for everybody. Let me actually look it up because I'm not gonna lie, I just clicked the
I have
hyperlink.
Everybody Games LLC as a gamer.
That sounds pretty close to
Yeah,
being
at
right. It is
TTRPG Everybody Games on Facebook.
yep,
If
that's
you're
it.
still on Facebook.
That's yeah, if you're still on Facebook, you can do that. But those are the big ways to get me. And like, hey, if you're on Discord, I'm hanging out in the Hex Grid Heroes now. You can just at Alex Augunas or at the Everyman Gamer. Both those will get
Yeah,
me.
cool.
Um, you can chat with me here. That's fine. I don't plan on popping out. And those are the big
Cool.
places I think that if you want. One last thing, if you aren't sure if this sounds like it's for you, don't worry. I wouldn't make you buy my book on good my word
Mm-hmm.
alone. You can actually go to the Kickstarter page, and one of the images talks about a preview. And if you click the link on that preview, it'll take you to Drive Through RPG. There is a pay what you want file
Oh.
that will give you a preview of three species content plus some talents. You'll get all 6 pages of the Kitsune, which is literally everything that I have done for it, putting up all nice with art assets and
Mhm.
stuff. You'll also get one additional species. The difference between featured and additional is that featured have 6 pages, additional have
Mhm.
2. The additional species in the book is brand new. I've never published it before. It's the Greys. So if you
Nice.
want to play a Gray, you could do it. There are 2 universal heritages in the book to check out. There's the Asmar and there's the Reborn. And the Reborn heritage is essentially you reincarnated. There are 2 lineages that you can pick from as a Reborn. You could be a Samsaran or you can be a Duskwalker.
Nice.
And then there are some talents you can pick that go with your choice of being a Reborn. Finally, there are 2 pages of universal traits, and most of the traits that are in that section go with different things that are offered by the Gray and the Kitsune and the universal heritages. So like they're all things that kind of fit. The book itself works. It doesn't have the alternate ability score rules, but if you just use the rules like I mentioned, where you basically have 12 starting points instead of 10, but don't have ability
Mhm.
adjustments, that's basically the core of it. But yeah, you can check it out, see if you like it. If you like it, you toss some money on Drive Through RPG. It's completely optional. That's why it's pay what you want. But then that might help you decide whether or not you want to back us on Kickstarter.
Excellent. Awesome. Until next time, thanks for hanging out.
No problem.